True story, my partners and I, in my very first internet company, circa 1993, we sold the domain name Budweiser.com to Anheuser-Busch for 50 cases of beer.
Welcome to Mitlin Money Mindset, your weekly dose of inspiration and insights to ensure you enjoy each step of your journey. Whether you're saving for the future, planning your next big adventure, or simply looking to add more joy to your life, you've come to the right place. Now, let's dive in.
I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Mitlin Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Mitlin Financial. Today's guest is Jay Baer, customer experience and digital marketing pioneer. Jay has spent nearly 30 years helping the world's most iconic brands gain and keep more customers. As a seventh-generation entrepreneur, Jay has written 6 best-selling books and founded 5 multi-million-dollar companies. Jay is an inductee into the Halls of Fame for professional speaking and word-of-mouth marketing, and the creator of multiple award-winning podcasts. He is also one of just 2 people in the world listed as one of the top 30 global gurus in 2 different knowledge categories: customer service and internet marketing. Media outlets like CNBC, NPR, Fox Business, and the Wall Street Journal frequently rely on Jay to comment and contextualize top trends. Jay loves growing businesses, delivering presentations that audience love, and plaid suits. His joy projects include being a licensed tequila sommelier and certified barbecue judge. Listen in for some great takeaways about growing and scaling a business by creating a brand that aligns with the people you are looking to attract. Well, I have the pleasure today of being with Jay Baer, customer experience and digital marketing pioneer. I am so excited for this conversation. Thanks for joining the show today, Jay.
Well, we'll see whether it's a pleasure or not by the end of the show, but I appreciate your optimism.
Listen, I've been following you. We're very intentional about who we invite on the show, so I know you got a lot of good nuggets that you'll be able to share with
Let's do it
with our listeners today. So, we'll talk a lot about what you're doing today, but I'm always fascinated by the entrepreneurial journey. And as I had mentioned in the introduction, you come from a family lineage of entrepreneurs, which quite frankly is not something that we find very common when we're speaking with entrepreneurs. It's usually their first generation, and maybe some other entrepreneurs have impacted them. So can you share a little bit about your experience up until, what you're doing today?
Yeah, I'm a 7th generation entrepreneur. My son is an 8th generation entrepreneur. Our family's been sort of self-employed in some form or fashion since like the 1840s or something. But I actually got a relatively late start on my journey. I started in politics. I was a political science major and ran political campaigns for a lot of candidates that you would know coming out of school. And then I went from there to a couple other jobs and ultimately started in the intranet business in 1993, so long ago that domain names were free. And true story, my partners and I, in my very first internet company, circa 1993, we sold the domain name Budweiser.com to Anheuser-Busch for 50 cases of beer. That is a true story, and that's how long ago we've been in this business. And so I never really had a company though that was sort of me on the line. It wasn't my money, right? I'd been a partner and some other things, but I was just always really scared to start my own journey, and I finally did. But I didn't get started until I was about 30 or so, which is fairly late for some entrepreneurs. But haven't looked back since. And so I sort of went from politics to what we would consider to be traditional marketing, to digital marketing, to customer experience, was sort of the evolution over time.
Yeah, I mean, you really been through the really from the very beginning, right? In terms of that, process from, intranet, internet, online, digital marketing, amazing. And,
Yeah.
we don't run into many families that have 7th and 8th generation entrepreneurs. So it definitely seems like it's something that was in your blood and inevitable at some point, maybe a little bit later, as you prescribe, but
It's
definitely
interesting. It's interesting when you say that, because I really don't ever remember like being sat down by my dad or my grandfather and be like, this is what we do, man. It was just like osmosis, just sort of like that's just kind of
Right.
you're just surrounded by. Now my mom's a school teacher, so not an entrepreneurial venture at all, but on my dad's side of the family, always. But yeah, it's sort of like in the air all the time, right? That you just sort of assume
Yeah.
that eventually, you're gonna do, and I'm sure my son will eventually. He has both an entrepreneurial venture and a real job, and I'm sure eventually he'll set that real job aside and do his own thing.
Yeah, it's a way of life. So, how did an observation, I found this very interesting, coming out of the pandemic, how did that, an observation lead you to write The Time to Win?
Yeah, thanks. That's my most recent book, and I kept reading all these things in the business press, and you did as well. Things like the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, and people not wanting to come back to the office because they don't want to spend time commuting in the vehicle. Bleisure travel, that's like a thing now. The combination of business and leisure travel, where you bring your kids
Right.
to the conference and double dip the trip, right? Even baseball now is a pitch clock, so the games are shorter. Like all of these things, I was like, these are being positioned as different trends, but it's all the same trend, which is that we care about our time and how we spend it more than ever. But every time I write a book, and this is my seventh one, every time I write a book, I am not the kind of expert who's going to say, you should do this because I said so. Beware of that kind of product. I
Hey, Jay, I have to say, I love that because I wrote a book last year called Financial Planning Made Personal.
Yeah,
And one of the main reasons and impetuses for that book was I can't stand financial quote unquote pundits who say everybody should be doing this or everybody, it doesn't work that way.
it's
It's
so
very personal.
reductive, right? It's actually harmful in some cases. So what I
Yes,
always do is
very much so.
I validate all of my theses with really comprehensive, very expensive, university level, national or international research. Because I don't want to write a whole book and then go give 100 speeches that says you should do this if it's not for sure true. So I did the largest research project really ever on the relationship between responsiveness and revenue. And it turns out it is true that we do care about our time and how we spend it more than ever. To wit, 2/3 of customers say that speed is now as important as time. 2/3. And the question is, do you actually run your business that way? And the answer is probably not.
Right. And I would argue, and I don't know if your study substantiated this or not. A lot of that comes from being in the Amazon, the DoorDash society, where we want those things when we want them because we don't want to spend time having to go out and get them. We see the value there, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of dimensions of customer experience, but the one dimension of customer experience that never moves backward is the dimension of speed and responsiveness. What was fast 5 years ago is positively slow today. And I've been doing this a long time, as we discussed a moment ago. And I have never, in my entire lengthy career, heard a customer or a client say, next time, why don't you guys just do that more slowly? Like people, they just don't say that, right? So the expectations around speed like continue to escalate and always will. And so as a business, you're never caught up, right? Your
Mhm.
customers are always escalating how fast and how responsive they expect you to be. And so you've got to be able to continue to kind of meet those escalating expectations. And if you do that, if you can make that happen, it is a tremendous business opportunity. For example, more than half of all customers and clients will hire whomever contacts them first, regardless of price. Regardless of price. So if somebody's thinking that they might need a new investment advisor and they lob an email towards you or ask to set up a meeting or leave a voicemail, like I would be on top of that within 15 seconds because
Right.
whomever returns that message first is going to more than half the time get that client. Now, most people in the money management world don't think that way, right? They're like, we're
Right.
not in the consumer products business. It's much more important to have a great relationship with our clients and have consistent returns. Yeah. But you're not going to get that chance if they don't become a client to begin with. And the reason this is true is mostly around psychology. We
Mhm.
live in a world now, and it wasn't always like this, but we do now because of the technology changes that you mentioned earlier. We live in a world now where we equate responsiveness to respect, especially in highly paid professional services.
Mhm. I am aligned with you 1000%. And you just validated two of our very highly valued core values that we have at our organization. And number one is responsiveness and proactive communication. That's number one.
Yeah.
And the second one that you really validated was one of our core values is question, review, and improve. Because to your point, what was fast 3 years ago, right? What was proactive and responsive communication 2 years ago may not be that same speed today. So we have to question and review and improve that on a consistent basis.
And even when you get down to contact modality. So my dad was a registered investment advisor and a certified financial planner for 30 plus years. I grew up in the business. I probably had an annuity when I was 5 years old. Like I've been down this road, right? And I remember him handwriting paperwork, right? And
Mhm.
almost every noteworthy transaction with a client was done in person. Either he'd go to their
Sure.
home after hours or they'd come to the office. It was a very, look you in the eye kind of business when I was a young person. And then it shifted a little bit and became slightly more telephonic. And now obviously email is a big part of the world. But as as generations change, their preferred modality also changes. So my son, he just came home last weekend. He lives in New York City, but he came home for the weekend and we were just messing around. I said, "Let me see your phone." He has 4,300 unread emails. I said, "Ethan, where all these emails come from?" He's like, "I don't know. I don't check it. I hate email."
Right.
But if you text him, he'll get right
Mhm.
back to you, or Instagram DM or what have you. But email, which feels like a very urgent digital form of communication for people in our cohort, is like sending somebody a telegram, right? If they're 23. And so you've got to understand, like, what do your clients today want in terms of communication frequency, modality, circumstances, and that does create some compliance challenges sometimes because there are certain transactions that, depending on who handles your money, you can't do it via text. You've got to have verbal confirmation. Like, it's not a completely, you're not selling chairs, right? I get
Right.
that,
Right.
but it is really interesting, especially in multi-generational clients where you've got, dad and then daughter, and they want to interact with their money manager in very
Completely
different
different.
ways. And that
Yeah.
creates a sense of nuance in client communication that a lot of firms just don't have solved yet.
Yeah, and what do you think the best way? Because our audience is really entrepreneurs across the board,
Yeah.
right? Not necessarily just financial services professionals. But if I'm sitting there, I have a business, and I'm like, you know what, Jay, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. I just don't know, how do I figure this out? How do
Yeah.
I make sure that I'm communicating in the way that I need to be
Yep.
communicating? How do I make sure that I'm updating that as time goes on and those things change and expectations change? What's one or two ways that basically any business, no matter what business they're in, can make sure that they're addressing those two things?
Yeah, I'll give you two or three pieces, which are actually drawn from the book. It's holding right here, The Time to Win. You're like, that's a really small book. And it is. It is an incredibly small book. It is only like 50 pages. And I did it that way because, as I said, I've written 6 other business books. And I sat down to write this book. And I was kind of going to do a regular book. And then I said, wait a second, I can't ask people to spend 6 hours reading a book about speed. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. That's the exact opposite of
Right.
the advice I'm trying to tell you. So I wrote the world's shortest book, and people love it because they actually read it. You can read it in 45 minutes, and that's why it's only like $9 on Amazon, because it's so short. But people have really, really loved it. So here's a couple things from the book. Um, the first thing you should do in any business is perform what I call a got it audit. A got it audit. Got it audit asks you to determine how long does it take your customers or clients to get it, to get whatever it is that they need from you. And that will vary a little bit from business to business, of course, but how long does it take them to set up an appointment, to pay a bill, to get a question answered, to get a part, to schedule a delivery, like whatever your deal is, how long does that take? Now, that sounds like a very obvious question, but it's not at all an obvious answer, because when I talk to business leaders about this, they say, well, Jay, Usually it takes 2 days, but if Julie's on vacation, it could be 4. And of course, if it's over a weekend, then we won't get it till Monday. But if everything goes perfectly, it could be a day and a half. And I'm like, whoa, stop. That is not data. That is a collection of stories that you tell yourself to manage your business. If you're going to use speed and responsiveness as a unique competitive advantage, which is the whole reason I wrote the book, that you can actually make money by being faster than your competitors. If you're going to do that, you have to know how long it actually takes you to do these things. So that's the first piece, is to actually do some analysis and say, okay, if we do have a new client, how long does it take to onboard them? Like, really, how long does it take? Is it 37 hours? Is it 6,000 hours? Like, not a story, but an actual data. That's the first piece you should do. It will help you a lot.
Nice. Yeah, very helpful. Now, you also, I've heard you say that, every business, and this probably dovetails nicely into this conversation also, every business should offer a fast pass, right? What do you mean by that? Obviously, fast pass was, I guess, the system that Disney had for a long time, where you kind of get a ticket, cut to the front of the line, and
they still have it.
Cut down your right. Yeah, I think they added some other different mechanisms, because we're a big Disney family. I know they have Lightning Lane, Genie.
Yeah, I think it's Genie Plus now is the main one. Yeah.
Yeah. So why should every business offer that type of fast pass, if you will?
People will give you money. We actually researched this specifically in the book, and we found that this is going to blow your mind. 1/4 of customers, now this is across the totality of the U.S. economy, but 1/4 of all customers will pay as much as 50% more to not wait.
Wow.
And you should give them that opportunity. You should give them that chance. And I, until relatively recently, owned a global digital marketing and customer experience strategy firm. And I realize now that I left so much money on the table, because we would get some big company, Fortune 50 company, call me and say, we want you to work on our social media strategy. Great. We'd be honored to do that. We've got 2 more in front of you, though, so we can't start until March. And that's just how we did it. And I realize now, like, that was so ridiculous, because what I should have said, and what everybody should say, is fantastic. We have a special program where people need things right away. We'll be happy to tackle it for you. It's going to be 20% more than our usual fee. Are you okay with that? And 1 in 4 times they'll say yes. Now, the question is, well, then if you're going to take this new opportunity, what happens to the one that you were going to work on before? Here's how you do it. You ready?
Yeah.
You go to the customer who was going to be next. You say, hey, we've got an emergency with another client. We're going to, with your permission, do their project first. It's going to back you up 3 weeks. But in exchange for that, we're going to reduce your fee by 10% proactively. Are you okay with that? And most of the time they will say, great. So you charge the new person 20% more, you rebate the original person 10%, you keep 10% for doing literally nothing other than shuffling your customer sequence. Look, emergency plumbers have been doing this for a century, right? If you've got water gushing out of your house, they will come Sunday at 3 a.m. Now, it's going to cost you, but they will show up. And all around us now, if you keep your antenna up, you'll see fast passes, right? TSA Pre is a fast pass. Clear is just a better fast pass. I was at Caesar's Palace in Vegas doing a speech, and they said, hey, check-in time's not till 4. It's only 2:30. But if you give us another $30, we'll give you your keys right now.
Right.
It's a free revenue opportunity.
Yeah. Sounds like a great opportunity that I imagine a lot of businesses are not taking advantage of, but they could very easily.
Absolutely.
And,
almost every business. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So, you made the shift, as you just mentioned, from, personal brand, company, branding company, global branding company, to a tequila educator. How did that shift take place?
Well, it's not really a shift. It's more of an evolution. I mean, I'll do 50 speeches this year at events all over the world, and writing books and podcasts and newsletters and all that. So I'm still very much in the business growth and customer experience world, and help a lot of people make more money. But my passion has always been tequila and agave spirits for 25 plus years. And 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, I decided, well, I'm going to take a little bit of the time that I have now, and I'm going to just see if I can teach people some things about tequila that I've learned over the last couple of decades. And so I started to make some videos on Instagram and TikTok. And I turned around, and all of a sudden I found myself as the second most popular tequila influencer in the world. And so now I have many, many, many tequila brands as clients. I've got hundreds of thousands of followers in social media for the tequila content that I produce. I get recognized in airports and hotels all the time, but only as a tequila guy. Nobody cares about the 7 books I've written, the 1,000 speeches I've given. They don't care. You start making some tequila videos, everybody knows you. So it's a really fun industry to be in, obviously. I'm down in Mexico visiting distilleries quite a bit. It's a blast, but it's a very entrepreneurial business. And there's now more than 2,000 tequila brands, if you can believe it.
Yeah.
And many of them are small family business entrepreneurship stories. So it's really fun to work with them.
Amazing. So where did that joy stem from? Was it just, like you said, an evolution? You started enjoying tequila for yourself, and then it just became a incredible passion of yours?
I'm from Arizona. Originally, I live in Indiana now, but I'm from Arizona. And I went to school in Tucson, right on the border. And so we would sneak across to Mexico all the time when we were younger, because the drinking age there was kind of non-existent. And so we'd go across the border and hang out for weekends and stuff. And so you just sort of get, especially being from Arizona, you get sort of ensconced in Latino culture at some level. But where it really started was when I was late 20s. My best friend and I would go every Wednesday to a restaurant and bar in Scottsdale. It's still there, called Los Sombreros. And they had a bartender there, Steve is his name, who was really into mezcal. Like this is 15, 20 years before mezcal was popularized in the US at all. And so every bottle was like a secret, right? It was like contraband. And so he'd bring stuff back across the border, and he and I would just go, before we had kids, we would just go every Wednesday for tacos and just sit at the bar and be like, okay, Steve, church is in session, teach us a thing. Right. And we were just enamored with the romance and how hard it is to make agave spirits and everything. It was really awesome.
Wow. Amazing. So, one of the things you talk about is taking the novice approach, right? How has that helped the tequila presence grow? And what do you think the lesson here is for, other entrepreneurs?
Well, when I started the tequila program, we had an observation that there's about 40 million Americans will have at least one cocktail that includes tequila this month. So that's sort of your addressable audience, right? There is an app called Tequila Matchmaker, which is similar to Vivino for wine, or Untapped for beer. It's where people go to rate and score and chart what they've consumed, etc. That app has 300,000 downloads.
Wow.
So your total audience is 40 million.
Right.
Your nerd audience is 300,000, essentially, right? So my observation was, I want to be able to reach the 40 million, right? Not just the 300,000. And so from the very beginning, our goal was to try to not be burdened by that curse of knowledge, and try and create tequila educational content that people who are just getting into tequila can appreciate, not just the people who like me, who spend all their time at it. So that's been really effective for us. And my partner, Maddie, who actually works in all my businesses, she's on camera with me most of the times as well. And so she's a young woman who is just kind of starting her tequila journey. So in many ways, she is the voice of the audience, and having her on the show has been really, really helpful in that way.
Yeah, because I could see how it gets intimidating, right? If you're a novice versus being on one of those platforms. Like I go on Distillery quite a bit because I'm a Scotch bourbon whiskey person. That's my kind of passion, if you will. And I see some of these write-ups and I read them and I'm like, how does this guy taste or smell this
is a lot
in this bourbon?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't get it. There's something wrong with me. So it could be kind of intimidating. And there are a lot of potential people in that addressable market that would be great advocates for the spirit, right? That you could lose if you're not speaking in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you have to pursue that. There's no such thing as a dumb question. If you're trying to build an audience, you'll love my podcast. It's called The Spirit Guides. We just started it long ago. And The Spirit Guides is an entrepreneurship podcast where I interview people who had a real job, like me, professional speaker, who then somehow became influencers and content creators in the world of spirits. So we interview Scotch experts and whiskey experts and rum experts. One guy was a realtor and one woman was a nurse and then became a Scotch. It's like it's like how I built this, but with booze. So it's a really cool show. You'll love it.
Amazing. We will we'll have that in the show notes for everybody, and I will definitely take a listen as well. You mentioned earlier with your son checking his phone and looking at those emails, right, and unread. Yeah. And I have the same experience with my younger son. I think I just alerted him. I'm like, hey, you have like 9,000 unread. Oh, he goes, I read the ones that are important. He goes, the rest I don't even bother with. But one thing that you've done is you've cultivated a list of emails, and you talk about that, transforming your ability to grow the tequila, organization for you. How has that helped you, and how do you combat, people like your son and my son who, maybe they're not there yet. I don't know how old your son is. Mine's turning 18, but they're going to be a potential in that addressable market. So how do you handle that?
Well, it's one of the things I used to work with clients on a lot. Is there's two types of reach. You have unreliable reach and you have reliable reach. Unreliable reach is when you create content or messaging and then you are beholden to a third party to show that to whomever they deem meritorious. So that's how social media works, right? Now, I've got hundreds of thousands of fans, but only a small fraction of them see any particular video I publish because Meta and Alphabet decide who sees it.
Right.
That's an unreliable form of business communication. And you can play that game effectively, and hopefully I do and you do, but it's still a game. And it's a game that you're not in control of the rules. So what I always try to do in any content project that I'm creating, whether it's a book, a podcast, Instagram videos, YouTube, is I try to de-anonymize the audience as much as possible, asking them to provide some contact information, most often email, but now more and more we're asking for cell phone numbers for texting.
Right. Interesting.
In exchange for some other content, like we publish a lot of lists, right? So 25 tequilas that are great for margaritas, 39 añejo tequilas under $74. Like we do a lot of lists and we say, hey, we'll send you this list if you give us your email address. Mm-hmm. And so we now have 36,000 emails, which is amazing, right? Because anytime I want to reach that audience, I just hit send. I don't need Instagram's permission or TikTok's permission to do so. And so that's one of our main strategies is to de-anonymize our audience so that the reach isn't unreliable, it's reliable. And I think for any small entrepreneurship-based business, that is some of the best advice you can ever get. Because if you're hoping that a third party is going to be your marketing department, you are going to be sad about that eventually. Because Facebook, YouTube, all those folks, they're in business for them to make money, not necessarily for you to make money.
Right. Basically, you're renting the list there and owning the list in that email or cell phone number.
Well said.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Big difference. So, one of the things I've heard you talk about, and I think it's unique for somebody like yourself because of your dad having been within the wealth management profession. How can keeping secrets around money, this is more relationship driven, hurt relationships? And I think very many times it does. But how do we change that?
It's so weird in this culture, right? This don't talk about money is the default setting for most people because it's gauche somehow or rude. Yet it's arguably, other than maybe health, the most important thing you can talk about, right? Like if you don't know what's true in your family or in your own circumstance, like how can you make reasonable decisions? I'll give you an example from the health standpoint, which I think is very applicable to this kind of financial blinders that we put on ourselves, especially our children in many cases. My best friend died of a heart attack like 3 years ago at the age of 49. after the fact, his mom told my other friend, oh yeah, they had a huge history of heart disease in their family. And his grandfather also died of a sudden heart attack under a similar situation. But she never thought to mention that to her son about this history of heart disease in their family, to which I thought that would have been information that maybe we could have passed along earlier.
Right.
And maybe we would have a different outcome. And the same thing happens with money talk, right? We don't tell our kids about it. We don't want to, I don't know, de-incentivize them or something. I'm not really sure what the core thesis is, but I think we would all be better off if we had more open and honest conversations about money and finances. And you've got to start it early, because when I was younger, and I think you too, we actually got, I mean, not a tremendous amount, but at least a little bit of financial literacy in school. Like they would teach you a few things. We had a program in 8th grade in Arizona where they teach you like checking accounts and how to pay bills. It was a really cool program. It was almost like a free enterprise kind of program. I think they've done away with it since then. But my observation is that in most places now, your kids aren't going to learn anything at school about any of this. And that's all the way through college. And so if you don't teach them, who's going to teach them? Instagram, TikTok, probably a TikTok video. And if you're like, yep, my kids should make all their good financial decisions based on a TikTok video, good luck to you.
Yeah, I agree. And we talk with the families we serve all the time that if they don't feel comfortable having those conversations with their kids or grandkids even, leverage us.
You have
us. We'll have those conversations because it's important that those conversations happen. And I think you can really pull that over to business too, right? If you have a partnership with somebody, that transparency around and conversations around money are so vitally important, because you want to make sure that everybody's rowing in the right direction and knowing what's going on under the hood from a financial aspect, probably just as important. So I agree with you.
I mean, there's two reasons that business partnerships, three reasons that business partnerships don't work out. And I've been counsel to many of them. I've never had a true partner, and there's a reason for that. but I've been around a lot of them, and there's three reasons why it doesn't work out. One, the partners are too similar, right? They don't complement one another.
Right.
They duplicate one another. That typically becomes a problem. Second, there is an inequity in effort, right? You've got one partner that works materially harder than the other, and that initially will create resentment and then ultimately will create a fracture. And then the third is exactly what you said. There just isn't enough communication about things that matter, and it's typically around money and cash flow and issues like that. And then it becomes really ugly, and everybody goes their separate ways.
Yeah. Well, listen, Jay, it's been a pleasure, and I agree. We're very much aligned in a lot of ways, and you definitely can tell you take a lot of joy in what you do, and joy around the tequila roll as well. Sounds super
it's a blast.
exciting and fun. And we're all about joy here. So the last question we ask each of our guests, because we are all about joy, is what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
What did I do today that brought me joy and put me in the right mindset for success? I actually, today, just before we started, put the finishing touches on a brand new keynote speech that I will hopefully be delivering some version of for the next 18 months, all about AI and sort of a clear-headed look at artificial intelligence and how to use it for marketing and customer experience without turning off your customers. So it's probably the new thing I'm going to be talking about for the next little while. And so that's a big thing for me, right? Sort of writing the new speech is something you only do every couple of years. So I'm really excited to get that out there and take it on the road and help some people.
Awesome. Sounds timely, sounds interesting. And I look forward to hopefully hearing it somewhere along the line.
Thanks.
So thank you for sharing that. Now, we're going to have all your information in the show notes. We'll have links to the Time to Win, your podcast as well. But if people want to learn more about you, kind of connect with you, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
That's great. I should say, if you go to thetimetowin.com, all the research is there. So the research that was used to write the book, I don't even ask you for your email address in that case. I just want you to have it. So just go there and download it, and it's yours. You'll love it. There's a lot of really interesting findings in there. But my main website is jaybaer.com. just like my name, jaybaer.com. And you can find me on for tequila. Just look for tequila Jay Baer. You'll find me. I'm out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time. Greatly appreciate it. A lot of great nuggets in there for our listeners, and enjoy your day. I want to thank Jay Baer for being a guest on the Mitlin Money Mindset. Jay comes from a long lineage of entrepreneurs. He may have the deepest roots of any entrepreneur we've ever had on the show. Jay has used his success to help countless other businesses utilize his experience to help them grow quicker and smarter while building the right audience. This type of expertise is hard to come by. Jay Baer and everything he's up to can be found across most social media platforms. All of the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Mitlin Money Mindset. Remember, it's not just about the money, it's finding joy in the journey and embracing the right mindset. If you love the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Don't forget to follow along for more tips and inspiration. Please visit the social links below to connect with Larry or his guests. Until next time, keep smiling, keep thriving, and remember to think about, what did you do today that brought you joy?